food and nutrition sovereignty in this country.
Well, let's now look at some of these areas where you'd be formulating and implementing policies. And I'd like to start off from the most controversial and hotly debated of it all, which has to deal with grazing reserves, ranches, and things like that. Because, as you mentioned earlier, this has been most visible because of the issues surrounding security, farmer herder clashes, and all the rest of it. So let's see, how is this? In the past, there used to be known what was the cattle routes, but of recent, these hardly ever exist. And there have been so many controversial issues relating to modern practices in herding. So let's hear what your ministry has outlined in developing that sector.
Thank you, Cyril. Hardly you do discuss livestock in this country without anybody talking about the migratory nature of animal herders and the issue of grazing reserves as well. Yes, ranching today, or from history, has been the singular most visible practice of animal husbandry in many regions of the world. Even here in the country today, there are a few ranches you find all over there are a few ranches in the country. However, the number of animals under cattle ranching are negligible. And what people do see actually are the herders that are migrating from one point to the other across the country. And therefore somebody will want to ask, what happened to those grazing reserves? The grazing reserves have been created right from 1957. Shortly before independence, the Lugard directed one Malam Hamis of Kano to do some mapping out of grazing reserves, and they were so gazetted. And since then and now, from our inventory, since assuming responsibility of this ministry, we have inventorized about 417 grazing reserves across the country. Many of them have been gazetted, many have not been gazetted. But since the creation of those grazing reserves, there hasn't been any conscious effort to put in the necessary infrastructure to receive animals and herders in those grazing reserves. And that is one definite step that we need to take to discourage, transhumance nature of animal husbandry in the country. And therefore, we have done that inventory. We have also taken an inventory of all the cattle routes as they existed at the time of creation. But between that time in 1960 to date, there have been a lot of changes in the population and city growth dynamics in the country. Cities have grown, demand for infrastructure have grown, a number of other shifts have happened. Many of the lands that were earlier on dedicated as grazing reserves, particularly those near the cities, have been gobbled up. The grazing reserves have disappeared, some of them today from our own map that we have digitized the country, they end up in city centers. And therefore, we are working with the subnational governments to ensure that grazing reserves are taken away from settlements, away from cities, away from schools, and then given a new location altogether. And then beacons are established as legal evidence that these are dedicated cattle routes. For the grazing reserves as well, we have gotten all the coordinates across the country. And we have the status of those that are gazetted and those that are not gazetted. And like I said, we are talking with the state governors so that we move in there. They have also been digitized. Okay. We have a map of Nigeria indicating the location of all those grazing reserves, their sizes, their coordinates, and their suitability or otherwise. Whether they have bodies of water, streams, marshy land, rocks, or whatever. Because these are the kind of evaluation that we require to get us ready to go and put the necessary infrastructure. Now, the intention of the ministry, after having that inventory, we are now holding discussions with the state governments, local governments, community leaders, as well as associations of livestock breeders across the range, to come to a term to design a model where we can put up necessary